Welcome to episode 94 of Norse Myths, Legends, and Folktales. My name is MyLinda Butterworth, and today we continue the Saga of Thorstein, where the foster brothers meet Otunfaxe for a bloody battle in chapters 23 and 24 of Viking Sun. Chapter 23. When they had made ready, they rode quickly around the nest, and then they saw the place where Otunfaxe and all his naval force was lying. Without delay, they sent forth a shower of stones so hard and vehemently that they slew more than 100 men in their sleep, having taken them by surprise. But from the moment when the warriors awoke, they made a powerful resistance. Then a bloody battle was fought. A large number of the men of the foster brothers fell, for it could almost be said that Otunfaxe shot from every finger. So it went on until night set in. Then 10 of the foster brothers' ships were cleared. On the second day the battle began anew, and the slaughter was no less than on the day before. They tried several times to board Faxe's ship, and every time they made great slaughter, but they never succeeded in boarding Ullaid, both because Faxe defended her and because her sides were so high. But in the evening all the ships of the foster brothers were cleared, excepting the dragon called Ufa's Knot. On both days they saw that 2 men came from the island, and that they took their positions one on one crag and one on the other, both shooting with all their might at Faxe's ship. Here they saw the dwarf Sindra, every one of whose arrows brought down a man, and in this manner a great many of Faxe's men lost their lives. Then one on the other crag was Brenner, who was shooting more like a bowman out against the ships. It did happen occasionally that stones came flying over the ships, and every stone thrown by Brenner was inclined to go to the bottom, and as a consequence of this, many of Faxe's ships sunk. Thus it happened that all his ships too had been cleared excepting Ullaid. This battle took place at that time of the year when the nights are bright, and therefore they fought the whole night. Thorstein, together with Angantyr and Bele, tried to board the dragon, but there were many men left on Ullaid. Faxe ran forward against the foster brothers. Angantyr and Bele and a good many blows were given and received, but no iron weapons could bite Faxe. And before they had fought very long, Angantyr and Bele began to receive wounds. At this moment, Thorstein approached, and with his club he smote the cheek of Faxe in the way that it came handiest for him. But Faxe did not even lout the least at the blow. Thorstein smote again, just as hard as before, and now Faxe did not like the blows, but plunged himself overboard into the sea, so that only the soles of his feet could be seen. To both Bele and Angantyr it seemed disgusting to follow him, but Thorstein ran overboard and swam after the fleeing Faxe, who looked like a whale. Thus a long time passed until Faxe landed, but the foster brothers fought with those men who were still left, and did not cease until they had slain all on board the dragon. Then they took a boat and rowed ashore towards Faxe and Thorstein. But Faxe, having landed, seized a stone and threw it at Thorstein just as the latter was swimming toward the shore. He warded off the blow by diving, and swam out of the reach of the stone, which made a great splash as it fell. Faxe took up another stone, and a third one, both of which went the way as the first one. But meanwhile, the foster brothers, Angantyr and Bele, approached. When Thorstein sprang overboard, he threw his club backwards, but Bele had taken it up, and having now reached the spot where Otunfaxe was standing, he smote him in the back part of the head with the club. This he did uninterrupted again, while Angantyr at the same time was pelting him with large stones. Now Faxe's skull began to ache considerably, and not liking to receive their blows, he plunged himself from the crag down into the sea and swam from the shore, pursued by Thorstein. Faxe, observing this, turned against Thorstein and wrestled between the two swimming antagonists. Now took place in which there were great, fearful tussles. They were alternately drawn into the deep by each other, and yet Thorstein found out that Faxe's strength was greater than his own. And it came to pass that Faxe brought Thorstein to the bottom, and thus he lost his power of swimming. Now Thorstein, being almost sure that Faxe intended to bite his throat to pieces, said, "How could I ever want you more than now, dwarf Sindra?" And suddenly he observed that Faxe's shoulder was seized by a grip so powerful that he soon sank to the bottom with Thorstein upon him. Thorstein, who by this time had become very tired from the struggle, seized the belt knife which had been given to him by Sindra and stabbed Faxe in the breast, sinking the knife into his body up to the handle, and then slashing his belly down to the lower abdomen. But still, he found that Faxe was not dead yet. "For now," said the latter, "a great deed you have done, Thorstein, in putting me to death, for I have fought 90 battles, and being victorious in all except this. In duels I have been the victor 80 times, so that I certainly may say I have had a home gang, but now I am 90 years old." Thorstein thought it useless to let him go on prattling any longer if he could do anything to prevent it, and so he tore away from him everything that was loose within him. Now the saga goes on to tell about Angantyr and Bele, that they took a boat and rowed it out into the sea, searching for Faxe and Thorstein. Now the saga goes on to tell about Angantyr and Bele, that they took a boat and rowed it out into the sea, searching for Faxe and Thorstein. But for a long time they did not find them anywhere. At last they came to a place where the sea was mixed with blood and quite red. They thought it must be that Faxe was at the bottom of the water, and that he had slain Thorstein. And after a while they saw some nasty things floating upon the surface of the sea. They went nearer and saw some large, horrible-looking bowels floating there. Shortly afterward Thorstein emerged from the water, but so exhausted and outdone that he could not keep himself afloat. Then they rowed over to him and dragged him on board. At this time there was but little hope of his life, and still he was not much wounded, but the flesh of his body was almost torn from his bones in knots. Then they went away and procured some relief for him, after which he soon came to his senses. They went back to the islands and made a search of the battlefield for the slain, but only 30 men were found fit to be healed. Then they went to the old man Brenner, thanking him for his assistance. Thorstein went to the lesser Brenner's isle to call on the dwarf Sindra, to whom he made splendid presents, and thus they parted in great friendship. Thorstein got the dragon Ullid as his lot of the booty, while Bele got Ufa's knot, and Angantyr as much gold and silver as he wished. Thorstein gave his uncle Brenner all those ships which they could not bring away with them. With 3 ships they left Songen, where they spent the winter. Chapter 24. In the spring they set out for warfare again. Angantyr asked whether they should turn their prows, saying that he thought the Baltic had already been cleared of Vikings. Says King Bele, "Let us then take our course unto the western waters, for we have never been there a harrowing before." So they did. And having reached the Orkneys, they went ashore and waged war, destroying the inhabited parts of these islands by fire and plundering the fee. And so fearfully did they carry on their depredations that all living things fled for fear of them. Harold, called the Jarl, who ruled the islands, when he heard of their depredations, he gathered an army to meet them and marched by day and by night until he found them in an island called Pap Isle. Here it came a battle between them, and their troops were equal. For 2 days they fought in such a manner that it would not be seen which party would be victorious. At last the slaughter began to lean to the disadvantage of Harold, whose ships were cleared, so that the brothers succeeded in boarding them, and finally Jarl Harold fell, together with the most of his men. Hereupon they made expeditions through all the islands which they subjugated, and then bussed them themselves for the home journey. King Bele offered to make Thorstein Jarl of all the islands, but the latter declined, saying, "I would rather be a herser and not part with you than have the name of Jarl and live far away from you." Then he offered Angantyr the Jarlship of those islands, which offer was accepted. The latter became Jarl and was to pay an annual tribute. Afterward they returned home to Sogn, where they stayed the next winter, keeping their men well, both as to weapons and clothes, and now none were thought to be superior to the foster brothers. Children were granted to them, the sons of Belti called Helga and Halfdan, and his daughter called Ingeborg. She was the youngest of the children. Thorstein had a son who he named Frithjof. Harold grew up in the Isles with Grim, but when he had reached the age of maturity, he set out a herring and became a most noted man, although he had not much spoken of in this saga. He kept his nickname, being called Harald Kisia, and a large family is descended from him. Thorstein, Bele, Grim, and Harold remained friends as long as they lived. And here is where I end my tale for today. But I'll be back with more tales. Many more tales. Until then, my friends, enjoy the journey.